All right, this time we will move on to superintendent's recommendations and reports. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Birding. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Martin to cover the items listed under Personnel Professional.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birding and members of the board, I have for your consideration this evening several items under Personnel Professional. Item number 1, resignations, letters A through J. Item number 2, employment, letters A through J. Letter K is extracurriculars for 2018-19, this past school year. And letter L, home instructors for 2018-19. That concludes the items I have for your consideration this evening under Personnel Professional.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendations.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the board? Mrs. Lane, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Shorter?
Yes.
Mr. Begley?
Yes.
Mr. Birding?
Yes.
Mrs. Gundrum?
Motion passes.
This time, I'd like to ask Mr. Penny to cover the items listed under Personnel Support.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birding, members of the board, I have the following items for your consideration this evening under Personnel Support. Under item number 1, resignations, letters A through D. Under item number 2, employment, letters A and B. And under item number 3, promotions, letter A. This concludes the items I have for your consideration this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Penny. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve or accept the recommendations.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Lane, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Begley?
Yes.
Mrs. Shorter?
Yes.
Mrs. Gundrum?
Yes.
Mr. Birding?
Yes. Motion passes.